Hey guys, this is going to be a very casual video, hence the sweater and the coffee. It's going to be a casual video where we just talk with one another about demotivation as it relates to you feeling like a failure, okay? Now I can say that confidently and not feel like I'm being mean because really I'm talking to myself, okay? How do you stay motivated and finish your game? How do you finish your games? Multiple games. I hope that you can finish multiple games. How do you do that and stay motivated despite feeling like a failure? And by the way, it's inevitable, and we're going to talk about that. So I was born, maybe some of you relate, let me know in the comments below, and also leave a like and subscribe if you like indie game videos like this. I was born with this mentality that is, well, I'm constantly self-defeating. I always sort of yell at myself internally. This is just who I've been since I can remember. I was born this way, just constantly yelling at myself and being negative towards myself. And this has led to a lot of mental problems and weird stuff that you probably know about. Just if you're that way, you know how it feels. And this year has been particularly bad. I don't know why. It's just been a weird year. 2022, I've told my wife, 2022 sucks. And that's just because my brain has been a little bit weird this year. Despite having success, it still is a problem. And you know, you can have, this isn't like wild success. Like I'm not like a billionaire, but like I've made a game called Pinstripe, also made a game called Neversong. And we're working on our third game. I have a successful online school. I have a successful YouTube channel. I have a great life. Despite all of that, there's still this demotivated sense of failure, right? How do you get past that? Well, I'm going to give you the tricks that I use. And the first one is to recognize that every game developer out there feels this way. And this shouldn't be surprising to any of us. But every game developer out there, no matter how successful they are, is going to feel demotivated. They're going to feel burnt out. They're going to feel like they're not the right person for the job, that they suck, that their project sucks, that the mountain is too hard to climb, right? Hopefully this is obvious to you. If this is not obvious to you, then congratulations, you've just, well, received one of the greatest gifts of your life, and that is recognizing that everybody on earth feels demotivated and feels like they can't handle the mountain ahead of them. Every entrepreneur in the world has felt demotivated, and every entrepreneur in the world has failed, and we'll talk about failure in just a second, okay? So even me, right? I feel this way all the time. I feel this way yesterday, I feel this way today, and I will feel this way tomorrow. It's sort of a constant that you're going to have to work through, okay? Feeling demotivated, feeling like a failure. So one of the things that I do is I actually look for the smaller wins, okay? This was especially true when I started making games, and this should be true for you as well. You should be looking for small wins. So what are some examples of small wins? Releasing a asset pack, even if it's free, an asset pack on the Unity Asset Store. So that's like beautiful sprites, 2D sprites that you've made, or 3D models. All of these are small little wins. And again, they could be free. Another example is release a game on itch.io, right? A small, crappy game on itch.io. And you will get bad reviews, and we'll talk about that in a second. You will get bad reviews for these small little things that you release early on in your career. Now, if you're just starting out and you still have nothing to show for it, that's totally fine. That's normal. You should still be releasing little animated GIFs or images or videos or maybe even devlogs, just explaining honestly, like I'm doing here, how you're doing and what you're working on. The reason we're doing this, okay, the reason we're releasing small little pieces of content is what I'm calling little wins. And they're not wins in the sense that everybody loves what you do. Excuse me, they're wins because you're sort of priming the pump and reminding yourself of what your goal is. Your goal is to release something, right? Your goal is to release content, okay? To release video games. That's the end goal here, right? You want to make video games, you want to release something to the world. You want to put this on a store shelf. Well, a digital store shelf, right? Steam, Xbox, PlayStation, GOG. Well, if you do it slowly, starting out, just slowly release content, you're reminding yourself who you are. You're a producer of content, right? You're producing content. And I even get this way with YouTube, okay? If I don't release a video for you guys in like 2 or 3 weeks, I start to sort of settle into this mindset, almost a hermit mindset of like, they don't want to see me anyway. They don't want to hear me talk. I'm annoying. They don't want to hear from me, right? I'm this way with friends. I'm this way with my family. It's terrible. That's just the way I was born. Let me know if you feel this way. So what I have to do, just like it is with friendships, you got to text friends and say, hey, do you want to hang out, right? Even if you feel like they don't want to hang out with you, you text them and say, hey, do you want to hang out, right? The same is true with releasing content for your games. Release animated GIFs, release what you're working on, release devlogs, small little wins to remind yourself that you can do this, that you're brave enough. And then ultimately, my final point here is it builds up a callus. It builds up a callus, and that callus is, well, it's strength. It's the strength to say, you know what, I'm going to put myself out there even if I'm not confident. And when you do it with small stuff, it's not as scary, okay? Because I can assure you, releasing a game on Nintendo Switch is a lot scarier than releasing an animated GIF on Twitter, okay? Or TikTok or whatever. Now, this leads me to my next point, which is, okay, Thomas, what if I'm releasing these small little pieces of content and they're not wins, they're failures, okay? Well, we could still call them small wins. And this, by the way, this is not some karmic woo-woo. I'm not saying it's like some spiritual thing. Your failures are still wins, because failure, I've written it down here on my computer, failure is an indication that you're doing something right, okay? If you're not failing, I think that's a red flag, okay? So if you're never receiving criticism and you're not really receiving negativity, it's probably because you're releasing mediocre, lukewarm content, or you're not even releasing content at all. You're not doing it enough, okay? You need to put yourself out there so often that you're receiving failure, okay? Failure is the only way you grow, right? I can't think of a better way to grow than failure. And when I think of the top game developers and the top entrepreneurs, digital entrepreneurs, these are people who know how to fail. In fact, their gifting is failing big and failing publicly, right? Steve Jobs is a great example, right? Gets kicked out of his own company, Apple. Starts his own company after that. Next? And then he goes and buys back Apple. Failing publicly and failing big, if you know how to do that, you're invincible. You can do whatever you want, okay? I need you to learn how to fail often. And this is me, again, talking to myself. Thomas, I need you to learn how to fail big and fail often. That's actually one of my goals. It's one of my prayers, even. I'm constantly asking for failure because I don't want to be scared. Like my goal is at the end of my life, I say, man, I just really wasn't scared of anything. Because at the end of the day, who cares if someone leaves a negative comment? At the end of the day, who cares if certain people don't like what you did or what you made? That's normal. That's life. That's a good thing. So remind yourself, when you're feeling insecure and demotivated and you want to quit, remind yourself, if I don't fail at this, then I probably did something wrong, okay? Now that does bring me to my next point, which is, are you actually failing big? Like, I want you to fail big. I do. I want you to have a spectacular set of failures in your career as a game developer. I would be so happy if you would just fail big. And I'm talking to myself here. Thomas, I want you to fail big. That's good. It doesn't mean you've done something immoral or wrong and you get in trouble. I'm just saying, release stuff that the world doesn't like. That's great. Fail big. But the question is, okay, are you actually failing big? Because most of you think that you've failed big and when you get a negative comment, or your game crashes, or you get a bunch of errors in the console window on Unity, or you can't figure out how to code, or you can't figure out how to do art, and every time you try to make something look beautiful, it sucks, or every time you try and write a beautiful song for your game, it sucks, or your game just isn't fun, right? A lot of you see that as big failures, when in reality, you're probably, and again, I'm talking to myself here, so no offense, you're probably being dramatic, okay? Most of these things that you think are failure are they're just normal road bumps. They're not even failures. You didn't even fall down. So I'm going to ask you to just redefine failure. Failure, it needs to be big and it needs to be painful. All this stuff that sort of keeps you awake at night, negative comments or just the struggle, a lot of you are just in the grind. The grind is, I don't understand Unity. I don't understand how to code. I don't understand how to model in 3D. Or my artwork sucks. It's these small little things, and to you they're huge, but they're not actually that big. It's kind of funny when you're willing to pay and spend the time to go to class, like at a university. That grind feels different. It's like it's much more methodical, and we're willing to accept that it's difficult. But the moment we say, okay, I'm going to do something on my own, I'm going to learn how to make games on my own, and you're alone on your computer and you feel like the whole world is away, like nobody's with you, you're just completely alone in your office or your bedroom learning, suddenly the panic sets in and you feel like, oh, I'm a failure. I don't know what I'm doing, right? I don't know why that is, right? Why is it that when we're in a university or a school environment, we're willing to accept the challenge, right? Most of us are. And even when we get a C on an exam or a D or an F, we're still willing to keep going, I guess because we have to, right? But when it's our own ventures, suddenly we're not willing to accept that failure. And we think that it's an atomic bomb of failure, when it's not even failure. It's just a small road bump, okay? So try and think of learning game dev almost as a requirement. Like, I'm going to get this game done. Almost like I'm going to finish high school. I have to. Mom and dad will be pissed, right? Or I have to finish college because I paid for it, right? With game dev, just say, I've got to do this. I set out to do this. I'm going to give myself 2-3 more years. And I'm not going to cry. Again, I'm talking to myself, no offense. I'm not going to cry every time there's a challenge, right? It's not too hard because I have to do this, all right? So reconsider what failure is. Failure, here's a great example of what true failure is. Failure is spending 2 years on a game, investing money into a game, and it doesn't recoup the time and the money that you invested. Recoup is like, most of you know this, but it's like a fancy word of like you making the money back, right? That's a failure, okay? Failure is releasing a game and it gets a 60% on Metacritic. That's failure. I think you could consider that failure. That is the kind of failure I want you to pursue, okay? I want you to pursue the big failures. Don't be afraid of them. By pursue, I mean move after the target. I don't want you to make a bad game. I want you to be moving towards the target of failure and being okay with it, AKA William Wallace running into battle knowing that he might die. Like, that's what I want you to do, okay? Now, I want you to consider the pain of completely abandoning your dream when you're too afraid, okay? So when you're running into battle, when you're saying, I'm gonna make this game, I'm gonna learn how to make indie games, as you're pursuing that, I want you to consider, okay, what's more painful, running into the failure or just abandoning the dream altogether? I need you to consider, okay, which one is more painful? Quite often, the pain of abandoning a dream is more subtle. It's a dull ache, but the ache lasts for 10 years, right? Regret. Regret that you didn't try something. Regret that you didn't follow through when you had the energy. Let's say when you're in your 20s and you knew you had the energy to learn how to make games over the course of 3 years, you didn't. Instead, you went to parties, or you hung out at the bar every night, or you watched Netflix shows, okay? When you could have focused your energy when you were young to learn how to do something awesome, like make games, which is honestly the greatest job ever. That regret when you're 40 years old, do you want that? Do you want that subtle ache for 10 years? Or do you want the sharp, pointed pain of failure over the course of 3 or 4 years? And I can assure you that I've felt those sharp daggers of failure every quarter for the last 15 years. Bang, 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 bang. But personally, I'd rather have a sharp jab of failure for 1 hour every quarter for the last 15 years rather than a dull ache while I'm in my 40s, okay? So I need you to consider the pain of the two options: following a dream, or failing to follow a dream, or failures along the way. Which one do you want to choose? And you got to think of that constantly. This has to be a constant, function that's running in your head constantly. The function is called, motivation reset. And you need to call that function motivation reset anytime you feel like you want to give up. Go bang, okay, and it compares. It's a conditional statement, right? Or it's looking at two different variables, and it's going, which one is more painful? Abandoning the dream, dull ache for 10 years, maybe even 20, 30 years of dull ache, knowing you didn't try. Or sharp pains of failure for 4 or 5 years, and then this dream manifests, okay? This isn't hyper spiritual. I'm just saying that if you work for 4 to 5 years really learning how to make games, you're probably going to get some kind of career in the industry. I'm not saying you're going to be able to start your own full-time gig. Some of you might go work for AAA companies, or you might become at least, software engineers or something, right? It's because you worked hard. You did 4 or 5 years of learning how to make games, and you found a job, right? That's pretty sweet. So I need you to consider the two failures. Now, we've considered the two failures. Now let's put a nice bright sunshine next to those two dark shadows, okay? The bright sunshine is, what's the prize at the end of this tunnel, okay? Now, it does feel like a tunnel, doesn't it? I think that's a good metaphor. Learning how to make something like a video game, learning how to code, learning how to use software like Unity and Photoshop and Blender. It feels like a dark tunnel. It could be lonely. You can really just struggle to understand if this is even for you, right? It's a dark tunnel. It's lonely. It really is. I'm still pretty lonely these days, honestly, but I don't mind it. It's okay. It's a dark tunnel, right? But at the end of that tunnel, what's the reward, right? And by the way, when I say I'm in a tunnel, I guess I should say that's just my predisposition. I kind of like it here. But there's a bright sunshine in my life. Obviously, my kids and my family. But when it comes to the reward, the prize, what am I talking about? The reward and the prize. What is the reward and prize? What are you after? What are you really looking for? Okay? Let me give you some examples of what you can receive at the end of the journey, learning how to make games and make your own game. Well, are you okay, buddy? Come here. Sorry, he's been itching his ear. Come here, buddy. You okay? Poor thing. I think he has an ear infection. What's the prize? What's the reward at the end of the tunnel? Okay? I'll give you some examples. $500,000. Right? $1 million. And I know a lot of you are thinking, is it only monetary? Well, no. But the money's good. If you make a great game, yeah, the money's good. Or even a mediocre game. A mediocre game can bring in $500,000, right? The reward is running your own company. It's being your own boss. It's coming up with your own ideas. It's satisfaction in your career, knowing that you're making worlds, right? And putting something in here into the hands of players all across the world. That's pretty cool, right? It's also just being able to have a creative job. I know this sounds really lame, and this is probably not a good thing, but it's really exciting being able to tell people that I make video games for a living. One of the perks of having a fun job is that you get to share it with other people, right? And there's pride associated with it, I'll admit. But it's pretty cool just talking about your job, letting people know, hey, this is what I do for a living. That's a perk. That's a light at the end of the tunnel, right? But I think ultimately the biggest light at the end of the tunnel for me is knowing that the ceiling is endless, right? You're a pirate, and this is the last point I want to talk about. You're a pirate on open seas, right? And the booty is everywhere. You look all around your ship and you know that there are islands all over the place of opportunity. It's totally different than just a regular career, right? A regular career, sure, there's opportunity, but I think with making games, there's like 20 islands and 20 islands of different games. And also, it's not just releasing games, it's releasing online courses. I have 3,500 students who participate in my online programs as well, teaching them how to make games. Unity Asset Store, right? Contract work, devlogs that make money, right? There's a ton of monetary opportunities when you master digital production. If you can master software digital production, the opportunities are endless, okay? So for me, I've always imagined myself as kind of like a pirate, sailing the open seas, just looking for opportunity, looking for that buried treasure. That to me is such a hopeful, despite feeling like a failure and often losing motivation, I'd rather just have that feeling of sailing open seas as a pirate, looking for opportunity. That to me, that's what drives me. It's really, really exciting for me. It's not for everybody. Like, I'm not sitting here saying this is the greatest job for everybody, because it's not, right? But for me, and I think for a lot of you, the sensation of, well, I'll put it this way, knowing that you're in charge of your own, at least monetary and career destiny, is pretty freaking awesome. It's scary, and it does cause anxiety. But honestly, I prefer it. I do. And I tell my wife this a lot. I say, I'd rather sink my own ship than be on someone else's safe ship. I don't know why. It's probably pride, but it's also I just like freedom. So I would rather sink my ship as Jack Sparrow, right, than to work for somebody else. At least that's what I tell myself, right? That's what I keep telling myself in moments like this. And I say like this because I am in a moment of demotivation. It's probably why I wanted to make this video. That's what I remind myself of. So I hope this was helpful, guys. I hope these points were very, very helpful. I appreciate you being willing to sit through this cozy fireside chat. Be sure to subscribe, leave a like, and leave a comment, and I will talk to you guys later. Cheers.